So now what we want to do is we want to just start getting a final kind of render going here and kind of refining our mech down and start adding some color and some little details. So I'm just using the gradient tool here and just throwing down some kind of just soft gradients with opacity in the background just to kind of get a little bit of shading to the scene. And this will also help us kind of see, because we were working on a white background, or at least I was, to see where we have any kind of overpainting or little details that were left over that we need to go back in and just kind of clean up. So when we kind of come through here, we can see where different assets and things are happening. So I'm going to also come in here and check to make sure my opacities are right. So I'm starting to work up some of those original shadows I'd had worked in here, and there's like little gaps and little pieces that were left off. So just cleaning up our piece and trying to make it a little bit more presentable, so when we start adding final details and color, we don't have to worry about them. So I'm kind of masking off and grabbing the entire kind of layer in a group by just alt-clicking on a group folder, and that allows me to just select the outline of that, and then I can use it as a guide to help me kind of paint in some of my shadows, because up to this point we'd had general shadows in, but we didn't have really intense kind of surface information from other objects kind of painted in. We just had generic kind of lighting information in. So this will help us kind of paint in some different information on how the light's hitting in the different areas. So I'm just going to start working up and testing different ideas on how I want the shadow from the underlying and overlying objects to kind of cast on each other. So just going through here, moving some things around and adding back in those dark areas. And a lot of the time what I'm doing is I'm just making a new layer and I'm painting with black, but I have my layer style set to overlay. And that allows me to keep all the detail underneath, but to come in and actually add some shadow. So making that layer style with overlay, just naming it shadow and coming in and painting it, can really go a long way in helping it feel like it's being lit from a particular direction. So that's what I'm doing too, is I'll add sometimes some secondary shadows on a different layer with overlay, just kind of painting them in, see how they feel. And this can get us a lot more of that dimensionality and make it feel a lot more real. So coming back in here, trying to get more contrast, trying to push my shadows a little bit darker. Some areas where light really wouldn't get, it's nice to have those dark shadows. So don't be afraid to push it, especially once we kind of have a baseline. A lot of times it's really easy to not try to push your contrast and keep it in this kind of middle gray area. But using the full spectrum of almost pure black to almost pure white really does help kind of push our pieces and make them feel more vibrant and more alive. So I had some inconsistencies here with the head. It was a little too light on the one side. It was me just kind of playing around, seeing if any kind of color variation on those would be interesting. Just cleaning it up. And coming in, adding some more shadow to some different facets, making it a little bit darker. Some of these things were implied. We're just going to try to bring our attention more to it, and as we look at it, we can squint at it and see what's dark and what needs to be darkened still, and what needs to be lit more brightly. So here, instead of using black, now what I've done is I made an overlay layer, and I've added white, and now I'm using that and adding it to use it as a highlight. So now, wherever I paint, it'll keep my underlying detail, but what it'll do is it'll allow me the ability to paint in highlights and where highlighted information is. So I'm not really worried about it when I was originally painting. I just kind of had a general idea. But now I can really come in and force bright, hot spots and little edges that get caught with light all for free on a different layer. It's not in my paint. It's literally in its own kind of lighting layer. And again, that's just an overlay. So this will really help forms to start to pop, and we're going to start seeing things really come to the forefront and other things recede, just with this simple technique. So I'm just trying to hit all the edges that someone would kind of hit and think about the specularity of the metal. Be pretty tight little highlights. And sometimes they don't make 100% sense, like light wouldn't hit there all the time. But sometimes it's nice just to add a little bit of a highlight where some light maybe seep through or bounce off the ground. And it helps just kind of define the forms and allows us to see the mech a little bit better for what it is. So just keep going through here and looking for places where little edges could be hit and kind of be brought out. And you can see it's kind of just bringing it alive. It lets your eye kind of travel around it a little bit easier. So again, it's mostly any of the faces that are kind of facing the camera. Little tiny highlights kind of just get brought up. Kind of boring. Look through the legs here. Think about these big metal cylinders on the legs. Anywhere there's a crack, really. Anywhere where the surface is turning. Just think about it that way. It's an easy way to think about just adding in your general highlights. So this is on another layer, just as the overlay. This would be more like a general lighting pass. I'm just trying to brighten things up a little bit. So the first one was just trying to get our general highlights where the light is the brightest. And this is actually trying to physically brighten it up just to give us some more range. You know, we don't want the model to be all black and dark. We want to see pockets of dark and pockets of bright light. And what this will do is when we come to paint it, this will allow us a lot more freedom. So just working through and adding highlights where we see it and where light should be really intense, painting it up a little bit in here. It'll help a lot. So the top of these will be pretty bright. Thinking about these being pretty bright too. Not sure if I'm going to have them illuminated or not yet. And again, kind of cleaning up. You get a little messy, so don't forget to come back through and just kind of refine and use a sharp brush and clean up your edges. Because if you start drawing outside the lines too much and get too feathery and soft, it really gets hard for the human eye to kind of pick out details. So coming through here and just keeping that outside silhouette is relatively sharp can help a lot. So I painted all that information in, and then I just toned it down in the opacity because it was feeling a little too bright, but it was working. So what I've done here is I've just kind of merged down all the layers together. I still have it in a folder, but you can use Control-Alt-W and create a new layer with all of them collapsed. And then I'm going to clean up the knee here and just any kind of overpainting that I find, any softness from any of the shadow painting. I'm just coming in and I'm just kind of cleaning, like any of this kind of harsh kind of softness that's outside. We're just going to get rid of it because it's not going to do us any favors. It's actually just going to make it look a lot looser and a lot less realistic. So I'm just grabbing the entire thing and I'm kind of leveling it. I'm just trying to find a happy medium between the brights and the darks. And then I'm going to change the background relative as well, just to get a little bit better of a feeling. So again, just the polygon lasso tool, coming through here and just cleaning up a lot of the stuff that just happened to escape when we were painting. So we're just working around, finding different surfaces and things we can kind of play with. Coming through here, cleaning this out, and cleaning out the top part here as well. Coming around the hand, and then we're just going to work it. Let's see here. So I'm going to give him a little bit of a shadow here, just this big soft brush. And then we're just going to kind of erase away what we don't need. We don't need it to be too bright. You got to think about, he's going to cast a shadow on the ground, but it doesn't need to be 100% black because there's other lights that are bouncing around and kind of adding too. So maybe I'll make it under his feet a little bit darker. Exactly. So kind of play with the idea of his arms kind of casting a little bit of shadow, but pulling it way back. So we don't really need to make it a focus down there. So what I've done now is I've actually just selected the entire mech, and now I'm just casting a gradient onto him as an overlay. And what this is doing is it's giving just an overall kind of faked gradient. So the light, when the one side is dark and the other side is light, I can start playing with this and add light as a gradient, because that's kind of like how light will hit it as a surface. So now I've just made a new layer, just to multiply, and I can start putting down a base color of paint. Just trying to decide what I want it to look like. So blue can just kind of be the base. This can give me some just kind of general color, a little bit metallic, and I'm just going to start playing with the idea of different tones and colors and see what works for me. Not sure exactly what color I want him to be, but sometimes it's nice to kind of mix colors, especially even if he was going to be gray. I wouldn't want to leave him as just flat gray. I'd probably mix some colors to get to like a temperature, so a specific temperature. So I wasn't sure if I wanted to go back to like a kind of like a war robot here. Maybe he was a little more tan. So I'll kind of just play with your opacities, just using different multiply layers. And the great thing is, because we cleaned out the mesh, we can just kind of paint over it with it, and it should all work out. So just trying to darken up and kind of give some contrast to some different pieces. So pulling out some of the metal pieces on the leg, just trying to break them up and find like little interesting spots where we can vary the color. This can help a lot in kind of just leading the eye around. So a little ring there, maybe little accents on the hands. And all this stuff we just kind of worry about later. So I'm just looking for interesting little places to kind of add some variety in color and tone. So I was thinking about making these like maybe illuminated. It could be kind of just interesting. So I'll paint in just like a base color, and then I'll use a big soft brush to kind of make it feel like the light's kind of exploding out. And then maybe there's some like little highlights coming out of them, and a little bit brighter. I didn't really like the way the highlights were turning out, so those big soft brushes kind of give the illumination and the feel that it's kind of like the light's kind of seeping out. So I'm kind of just coming through here and cleaning up some of this surface detail where the light would be kind of bouncing off his arms, maybe bouncing off his head a little bit, just to give a little bit more detail. I was thinking about making his eye kind of glow in his head too. So just a little bit of a soft brush can do a big difference. So just coming back through and just kind of trying to figure out what works, what doesn't. Kind of pulling it back, pulling it forward. Don't be afraid to test different colors and just try different things. You know, I just erase out some of it, just was getting a little bit too overbearing. And just play with the layer styles and the opacities of the different colors. So I'd made these dark leg brackets before that were just a little bit too dark. I wasn't really feeling them. So now I'm just making another multiply layer, and I'm just trying to pull out some more silhouette stuff, just to have your eye kind of be drawn and have a little bit of a contrast against the background. It's a little bit less of a realistic technique. So if you're really going for a really highly rendered, you might want to stay away from the thicker black lines. But at times it can really help to kind of just sell the overall look of the design. Really pop it from the background. So again, now I'm just kind of going back through and doing the two passes I did before where I add in shadows and light. So I'm just kind of taking a far shot here, looking for places that I think light should be hitting the surface of the mech. And then, yeah, just painting around where I think light should be hitting. And the great part is it's on a different layer, so I just kind of decide. So now, switching back to my multiply layer for my shadows, just painting in where little tight little shadows would be casted. So maybe like underneath his little eye here, or around it. Casting little shadows off the side. And I decided to just start experimenting with some little design elements. This is a great time in the process to start playing with little medium to small detail information. So just trying to see what works, what doesn't work. So you see me kind of zooming in and out here a lot. I'm kind of just testing it, and I'm playing with it, and I'm seeing if it works, and then if I don't like it, then I come back in and I test it a different way. So never be afraid to just test really rapidly and quickly. You can do a lot of stuff with it. So again, just cleaning it up. When I had put my second light pass, I got a bunch of extra little artifacts. So just making sure we can constantly keep that stuff in check. It can be pretty helpful, and especially with mechanical stuff, we want that nice crisp hard edge. So here I'm playing with the opacity of little details on his face. Wasn't really feeling it, so just kind of toning it down and pulling it back can do a lot for us. Make it feel a lot more real. So just playing with the background color, seeing if a lighter background or a darker background would work better for him. So we can do the same with if you're working on a robot yourself. Don't be afraid to kind of manipulate stuff. So getting into the curves here. So I'm just kind of ability to adjust my highs and my lows, so my brights and my darks on the fly. So I was feeling like he was getting a little bit dark in some areas and a little too light in other areas. So I can just quickly go back through and adjust all my layers because I merged them down in one go. And I'm going to add a little bit of a sharpen to him. This can help a lot, especially after we're done rendering, to make them feel a little bit more real. And just crisp up a lot of the lines that we had that got a little bit soft. So I'm trying to darken the background a little bit, thinking that the light's coming down on him. It's a little more of a studio setup where we can kind of play with it here. So it's nice to kind of introduce some colors, even though I was working with black in my background. What I was doing there was just testing some different hue curves on the overall light, just to see what our results could be. So ultimately, I didn't really like the way it was hitting. It was getting a little bit too dark and and was drawing too much attention away from the robot, so I just kind of pulled it back. A little bit more white. And now I'm just kind of playing with the overall color scheme of him. Like maybe if he wasn't just so dark, or if he was had a little bit of a red tint to him. So I come in the curves to the individual colors here and just start playing, and I can get dramatically different color schemes and just see what works, what feels good. You know, it was getting a little bit dark there for a second. It's hard to read some of the tinier forms. So just experimenting with that. And using the exposure tools here as well under the same editing window to kind of be able to control the darks and lights inside the model.